Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And you might remember that in a previous episode we have identified and fixed the problem on the dragging clutch on this Formula Ford. So now it's time to put it back together. Meanwhile, I received all my parts for a total sum of 238 euros, and that included a new centering bearing, and in fact I did buy two of them just to have a spare one. We also got a new Throwout bearing, and here is the Throwout bearing, exactly the same as what we had in there. And as you can see, this doesn't have that play we had on the other one, so this should be quite all right. And then finally, we also have a new pressure group. This is our pressure group right here. You see this is brand new, the right size. And we have a new plate or disc. So the problem we had was that the shaft from the gearbox was actually grabbing into the crankshaft whenever the engine was hot. So it made that shaft spin even though the clutch was disengaged. So we fixed that problem. And if you want to see what this was all about and how we found it, then I recommend that you do look on that video, which I listed in the description. So the first thing we want to do is to install this guide bearing. Now, if you look closely on the guide bearing, it has a seal side and the other side does not have the seal side. So the seal side has to be all the way at the inside. So we're going to knock this in gently. But before doing so, I'm going to apply a little bit of grease. Now, the bearing itself should already be greased, but I'm just going to add a little bit to it. It never hurts. To install the little bearing, I'm just going to squeeze it in a little bit, and I'm using a socket which is exactly the same size, so that way we can knock it in very gently. And you want to knock it in straight. It's going in. Don't force it. The next thing we're going to do is to install the flywheel. And again, you want to have everything very clean, including the thread inside, because we will be using Loctite on the bolts to secure those bolts. So here's the flywheel. And that's always a little bit of pushing because this is a real tight fit. All right, it's almost in place. I'm just wiggling a little bit. All right. Okay, now the flywheel is secured with 6 bolts. So I want to make sure that the bolts that are holding the flywheel towards the crankshaft are absolutely clean. I don't want to have any oil on them because I need to torque them down. And that's why I'm always using some brake cleaner to clean them up. And have all 6 of them already cleaned up. Now, the other thing I want to do with these bolts is that I want to secure them in place. You don't want these bolts to come loose. And therefore, I'm using what we call Loctite. And I'm using a Loctite Red. This is going to bond it very well. Now, if you have to remove the bolts afterwards, this is going to be a little bit tough. You have to heat up the bolt to about 240 degrees centigrade. And then the Loctite will break loose. The other thing you really need to do is, once you start putting the bolts up, is that you actually bolt them down in a star pattern. So always the bolt across the other one. So you start on this side, and you go to this one, and then you go to that one, and you go to that one. And you always work your way around opposite to the other bolt you just tightened up. That way it guarantees that the flywheel goes on properly. The final torque is about 50 pound-feet. And for that one, you're going to need a torque wrench. I am not going to torque it down to the full torque from the beginning. I'm going to set it to about, let's say, 25 or maybe even 20. Torque them down, and then I go to the final torque of 50. Now, this might not be big enough. If you need a bigger torque wrench, then use that one. Now, the problem is the flywheel will rotate. Now, I've made a bar, and here is that bar, that I can put on those dowels that we have in there, and I'll just show you that, right? So, and I can hold it against it. There's a little hole in this bar, and then I can tighten these bolts properly and hold the flywheel because the engine is just sitting on some wooden blocks. So let's start with putting some Loctite on these bolts, just a little bit. We don't need to go over the top with this. All right, and we will do bolt by bolt until they are all in. You don't need to put massive amounts of Loctite on those bolts. Just a little bit is enough. I'm just going to start with tightening them slightly. And you can see that the engine is already rotating with it. All right. And this is just slightly connecting it. So I'm going to go to the first torque setting, which is about 20 pound-feet. And use my locking bar to hold it. Can I go opposite? Go opposite. And now we go to our final torque, which is 50 pound-feet. Then I go opposite. And that should be it. And it's always good to double check. All right, that is done. Now the next thing I want to do is to install the disc and the pressure group onto the flywheel. But before I do so, I want to make sure that the surface is really degreased. And again, brake cleaner does a good job. Installing the disc isn't all that difficult, but you have to pay attention which side is facing the flywheel and which side is not. So typically there's a mark on it. It says flywheel side, so you know it needs to go in like this. Now, the point is that this disc must be really centered. If it's off, you're not going to get the shaft in coming from the gearbox. So this really needs to be 100% aligned. And this is hard because you can't hold the disc because the pressure group or the pressure plate is going to go over it, and then of course the disc will move around a bit in it. So that is not always that easy. Let me just try to show you that what I mean with this. Right, so let's see if that disc is not in the right place, when you bolt this down, you have a problem. So you need to center the disc into the pressure group. And there are tools for this. However, I've made my own tool some time ago, like this, and you will see if I take the disc out, that will fit nicely and flush. I can stick it in there, and I know this will be centered. Remember, because also this is going to fit in properly. So everything is going to be centered properly. So this is a real good tool to use. Now, I made this one a long time ago, but you can buy tools on the market for this. So again, before we're going to put the pressure plate up, we need to degrease it. Because most of the time they have a coating on it. All right, so that's clean. I'm going to show you the way I'm doing this, but there's probably 1,000 ways of doing it differently. So I'm just going to go like this. Let's see where the dowels fit. That's where they fit. Okay, so it's slightly on. I'm going to put some of the bolts up, making sure they fit. Yep. I'm not going to tighten this down yet, because I still want to center my disc. But I want to hold the pressure plate in place onto the flywheel. Now these bolts, they require a certain torque as well. I think it's 15 pound-feet, if I'm not mistaken. Let me put these bolts up, and then we'll start with aligning the disc, okay? Let's see if we can get the tool in, and then try to center everything, right? So now I have the tool in, and everything is centered in place. So I don't have to worry about anything anymore. Now I can lock this down. I'm just going to go around the pressure plate and lock it down little bit by little bit. You don't want to twist this. This side is a bit more tight than this side. So now I can remove my center plug. And remember, when you remove the center plug, you just need to do it as soon as the disc is slightly in place and held in place, because otherwise these fingers will grab into the plastic, as you can see, and you can't get it out anymore. It's something I learned the hard way. All right, so now let's put it to torque, which is 15 pound-feet. And again, we're going to do it, going around. And always opposite. And that is it. We have the flywheel in place, we've got our clutch plate and the pressure group in place. So now it's time to see where my Throwout bearing will fit, because that's going to come right on here. So I want to see the distance between the block and the edge of those fingers of that pressure plate, and see then where this matches up with my Throwout bearing and the bootleg spacer that we have. On the gearbox shaft, we will have this bootleg spacer, which will push on the fingers. And then I'm going to have my Throwout bearing, which is going to push that guy forward. So I want to know what is the appropriate distance from the bootleg spacer, just touching the fingers here, so that I can double check it on the case and the Throwout bearing adjustment to make sure that it sits in the right place. And therefore, I will have to measure the distance between the fingers here and the block. And that looks like we got 90 millimeters or 9 centimeters. So let me check that on the casing. So I can actually now measure 9 centimeters, and that's where we have the bootleg spacer starting to grip onto the fingers of the pressure group, and it's about here. So this is the point where we start grabbing. So I want to be able to have a little bit play backwards, which is okay, and then from this point on I want to be able to push it at least 1 centimeter forward to disengage the clutch. So that should just work all fine. Now I'm going to mark this position. So let's mark this where that is. All right, and whenever we depress it, I want to move about 1 centimeter forward. So this is moving forward about 1 centimeter. All right, so let's put the throwout bearing up, and I'm just going to apply a little bit of grease. One is in, but the second one is always the problem, right? All right, so that one is good. Now we need to put the second one in, which is a bit more fiddling. So both clips are now in on both sides, holding the throwout bearing. It's a bit of fiddling to get them in because they are like spring-loaded, and they hook behind the lever here. So I couldn't show you that because my hands were always in the way. Now we need to fit the bootleg spacer, which is this one. I'm just going to give that maybe just a little bit of protection grease, but not too much. So when we're trying to put things together, it goes in smoothly. Not too much, of course, because otherwise you may get it on the disc, and that's not what you want. And that should be it. So with this, we should be able to reinstall everything. Now comes the most difficult part, mating the parts back together without taking too many things apart. Now, I did align things before I took it apart, but this is never easy. All right. After a little bit of fiddling, I got the complete rear end back onto the engine, and now it's just a matter of torquing down that bell housing to the engine block, and then we should be all right. Okay. And there's still a lot of other bars that need to connect, so I'm going to do all this, and then once this is done, we're gonna give it a try. We are almost done. Everything is back together. I'm just putting the wheels back to torque, and then we can give it a try. So let's do a little test and see if the clutch is working. That seems to be okay. I might need a little bit more. All right. So this feels good. I might have to adjust it a little bit once I'm on the track, but for now, that is good. The clutch seems to be working just fine. It engages and disengages as it should. I might need a little adjustment, maybe a little bit more freeing up the clutch whenever I depress the pedal, because it's a very short stroke for the moment, but that I can adjust by adjusting a bolt that I'm having right on the clutch pedal. I will test the car in 2 weeks on the track in France, Chambly, and then we'll see what else we need to do with it, and for sure you will see a video on it. So folks, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.